1 minute ago, Maya says, he raped me on a private plane. Courtroom explodes. New York City. The 12th day of Sean Diddy Combs' federal racketeering trial was not just another chapter in an already explosive legal saga. It was a reckoning. It was the day silence broke. What happened inside the courtroom was not simply testimony. It was confrontation, exposure, and trauma made public. And it was delivered by a woman the public will never see. She goes by Mia. Her real identity is sealed by the court. No cameras, no sketches. But her words were deafening. For nearly a decade, Mia worked by Diddy's side, first as an assistant, later as director of development at Revolt Films. And now she stood under oath, voice, trembling eyes locked to her lap, tearing apart the very empire she once helped build. According to prosecutors, Mia is not just a former employee. She is a survivor of psychological torment, forced labor, and repeated sexual assault by the man once hailed as the king of American hip-hop. She didn't look at the jury. She didn't look at Diddy. She cried through most of it. But she spoke. Her account painted a chilling portrait of life inside what the government now alleges was a criminal enterprise disguised as entertainment. Her words stripped away the platinum gloss of fame to reveal a machinery of control, humiliation, and fear. The courtroom was hushed when she recounted her first interview with Diddy back in 2009 at his apartment mid-phone call, no formalities. What began as her big break spiraled into an unrelenting nightmare. Mia described working for days on end without sleep, popping prescription Adderall to stay functional until her body collapsed. Only then, she said, was she allowed to rest. She was never off the clock, not in the house, not in hotels, not even on the beach in Turks and Caicos, where she claimed to have fled with Cassie, Diddy's then-girlfriend, after a violent outburst that left Cassie screaming, "He's going to kill me." And the control extended to everything. Mia was required to manage Diddy's schedule, anticipate his moods, and stay within his line of sight at all times. She wasn't allowed to lock her bedroom door. She testified that male staff had deadbolts. She had none. The government introduced emails, admitted under seal, describing the day-to-day chaos of life inside Diddy's orbit. Mia wrote about managing his social media, arranging film deals, handling his taxes, even cracking his knuckles. She did everything. She was everything, until she slipped and he reminded her that she was nothing. He called me stupid, worthless. He screamed in front of staff. Sometimes he threw things. The tone in the courtroom shifted as prosecutors led her into darker territory. She described being isolated, manipulated, and gaslit. And then the physical violence began. First against Cassie, who Mia described as a sister, then against herself. Mia testified that Diddy would fly into rages, scream obscenities, and on one occasion hurled a laptop at her head. He allegedly dumped a bucket of ice water on her while she slept in a hammock, then threw her into a pool. On another occasion, he allegedly slammed a door on her arm repeatedly. But nothing prepared the jury for what came next. Mia described her first sexual assault at the Plaza Hotel during Diddy's 40th birthday party. She remembered taking 2 vodka shots. Then everything felt wrong, dizzy, detached, frozen. She recalled him pressing her against a kitchen wall, kissing her, slipping his hand under her dress. The next thing she remembered was waking up alone in a chair at sunrise. She told the jury he was the king, my boss, the most powerful man in the room. Still, she convinced herself it was a mistake, until it happened again. At his Los Angeles mansion, she said she woke up to find Diddy on top of her. He told her to be quiet. He took what he wanted. It was quick, she said, but it felt like forever. This wasn't consensual. This wasn't sex. This was power wielded as a weapon. And according to Mia, it happened multiple times in multiple locations, including a private jet, where her memory fades, after he allegedly tried to force her into a lavatory. Her voice cracked when prosecutors asked why she never screamed, why she never said no. "You couldn't say no to Diddy," she answered. "Not to anything, not even a sandwich." When asked if he ever acknowledged what he did, her reply was haunting. Yes, but he made it sound like I wanted it. He'd say maybe I should tell Cassie what we did, like it was a secret we shared. Mia testified she never told Cassie, never told police. HR, she said, only intervened when Diddy wanted someone punished, and she wasn't alone. Mia recalled another assistant, Kayla Fowler, who reported violence against Cassie and was immediately fired. Afterward, Mia said Diddy told her exactly what to say if Kayla ever filed suit. A script, a false narrative. For the jury, it was an avalanche of allegations, each more harrowing than the last. But for Mia, it was her first day stepping out of the shadows. As she finished, she didn't look at Diddy. He meanwhile shook his head, clicked his pen, passed notes to his lawyers. But no movement in that courtroom could overshadow the impact of her words. And it was just the beginning. The gallery barely had time to breathe before the next wave of testimony hit. Day 13 began, where the shock of Mia's words had left the room raw. Prosecutors weren't about to let the momentum slip. With every second, they made it clear this case wasn't just about power, it was about how that power was enforced, covered up and recycled within Diddy's inner circle. They called back Deontay Nash. The celebrity stylist had already left an impression, unfiltered, unshaken, and often brutally funny. His return wasn't just for clarity, it was strategy. Deontay's casual charisma, his refusal to back down under cross-examination, served as contrast and confirmation. Where Mia was quiet and trembling, Deontay was defiant. Diddy's lawyer, Xavier Donaldson, came in hard. He wanted cracks in the story. He wanted inconsistencies. But Nash didn't give him any. Donaldson asked why Deontay hadn't told prosecutors about the blood on Cassie's face. Why now? Why on the stand Deontay looked him dead in the eye and said, "I didn't trust anybody. I gave the government as little as possible. They didn't ask. That's on them." He wasn't rattled. Not even when the defense tried to reduce the case to gossip, to stylist banter, to party talk. When they brought up Cassie's trip to South Africa for a film shoot, Deontay beat them to it. "Yeah, I set her up with Michael B. Jordan. He fine, she fine," he said. The courtroom laughed. Even the jury. Even Donaldson's co-counsel cracked a smile. But that momentary levity only made the next shift more brutal. On redirect, prosecutors took the jury back to the first night Deontay ever met Diddy. It was Cassie's 29th birthday, a night meant to celebrate her. But as Deontay described it, Diddy showed up late, made a scene, and demanded she leave her own party. She didn't want to. She wanted to stay with her friends. But Diddy had other plans. Drugs were involved, Deontay confirmed. Both of them using. But Diddy, he said, was in full control. And then came the line that froze the courtroom. Diddy looked Cassie dead in the eye and said, "Girl, you going to get some D tonight." It wasn't flirtation. It was declaration, ownership. A threat wrapped in a smirk. And with that, the tone was set for the rest of the prosecution's strategy. This wasn't about one night, one party, one act. It was a system, a structure built to control. They returned to Mia's testimony, now bolstered by Deontay's. The timeline was clearer, the patterns unmistakable. A revolving door of assistants, silenced victims, enablers, and silence. Mia's role shifted over time, from assistant to executive, but the rules never changed. The pressure only intensified. Prosecutors presented evidence that showed how tightly Diddy held the leash. Emails showing Mia tracking Cassie's movements. Messages demanding immediate updates. Records of surveillance-level involvement in Cassie's wardrobe appointments, and even her expressions on set. One email read like a director's note for a movie, only it was Cassie's real life. Hair should be pulled, no lashes, red lips, tell her not to look sad. And then came the financial proof, corporate credit cards, house leases, cars, clothing, all in Diddy's name. Whenever he got angry, he took them away. Witnesses said it was called the freeze. You were cut off, erased, punished. Mia wasn't the only one punished. Prosecutors brought up Capricorn Clark, a former creative executive. She too was pushed out after questioning Diddy's behavior. The jury heard how Mia was ordered to discredit her if needed. And then came the Prince party. According to Mia Cassie, and she defied Diddy one night, and went to a party at Prince's house. It was rare, it was spontaneous, and for a while it felt like freedom, until Diddy showed up. The moment their eyes met, Mia said she knew they were in danger. She and Cassie tried to flee, but Diddy caught Cassie, slammed her to the floor, and began hitting her. That's when Prince's security stepped in. The next day, HR didn't mention the assault. Instead, Mia got a call saying she was suspended for insubordination. The message was clear: her loyalty had been tested, and she failed. The jury heard how, in the days following, Mia was instructed never to talk about that night. Not to staff, not to friends, and certainly not to Cassie. Every moment of deviation had a consequence. Every slip-up had a cost. Mia described one incident in the Turks and Caicos where Cassie burst into her room screaming that Diddy was going to kill her. They barricaded the door with furniture, fled through the back, and ended up running barefoot toward the ocean. Mia recalled the mosquitoes biting her legs, the black sky above them, the pounding footsteps behind them, and later the escape by paddleboard. They fled again. This time across the water, Mia said, paddling into the darkness, while Diddy screamed from the shore. He was furious, unhinged, and unstoppable. The courtroom heard about Cassie's bruises, the busted lips, the black eyes. The jury was shown photos. Mia had taken images of Cassie applying makeup over swelling, hiding injuries from cameras. The prosecution played an audio clip, Cassie sobbing, Diddy shouting, and then the unmistakable sound of a slap. And still, Mia didn't report him. Because how could she? When she did report things to HR, she got punished. When others reported things, they got fired. When she tried to leave, she was reminded that she had nowhere to go. She told the jury, "I was taught to protect him," and I believed it. As the gallery sat in silence, the prosecutors reminded them, this wasn't just about what Diddy did. It was about what he built, a system of silence, a structure of abuse, with himself at the center, and with that, the courtroom braced for what was still to come. By the time prosecutors moved into the next phase of evidence, the jury had already been saturated with stories of violence control and psychological warfare. But what came next was different. It was administrative, procedural, and that made it all the more chilling. This part of the trial wasn't about screaming matches or black eyes. It was about systems, about how an empire was built not just on talent or fame, but on a rigid infrastructure of silence, loyalty, and fear. Mia's testimony resumed, but this time the questions weren't just about the assaults. They were about the day-to-day operations that enabled them, and about how control was normalized inside Diddy's world. She spoke about her transition from assistant to creative executive, a promotion that came without relief, without support, and without boundaries. She was still living out of Diddy's house, still on call 24/7, still answering to the same moods and outbursts that had dictated every previous role. Mia said she never knew when she was truly off duty. At Revolt TV, she was responsible for identifying projects, developing pitches, negotiating rights. But even in that role, she said Diddy could and would strip her of credit or funding on a whim. It was conditional success. Emails entered into evidence confirmed this dynamic. In one, Diddy praised Mia's work on a development pitch. In the next, he threatened to shut the project down because she had taken too long to respond to a text. It was a cycle: manipulate, reward, humiliate, control. And in every message, the underlying principle was clear: nothing was ever hers. Not the job, not the praise, not the air she breathed unless he allowed it. Mia testified that the physical outbursts were unpredictable but common. She described a moment on the set of a music video where the Wi-Fi cut out. Diddy, infuriated, allegedly screamed at her to fix it or call Bill Gates. Then he picked up a MacBook and hurled it across the room, missing her head by inches. She said she had come to expect rage. She had come to brace for impact. but it was the quieter forms of coercion that haunted her more. She remembered a night in Diddy's kitchen when he asked her to go to IHOP. She ran to her room first to change a tampon, something she hadn't had time to do all day. When she returned, she said he exploded. "You were supposed to leave right away," he screamed. Mia told the court that she stood there, frozen blood running down her leg, as Diddy screamed in her face, and then threw a bowl of spaghetti at her. The jury watched her describe it, her voice low, her posture collapsed. And still no one intervened. The next morning HR called. Mia was suspended without pay. The reason, insubordination. No mention of the food thrown, no mention of the blood, no acknowledgement of what had happened in that kitchen. Only punishment. That pattern repeated. Prosecutors walked the jury through more instances, reports ignored, retaliation disguised as protocol internal complaints, vanishing into the ether. They showed call logs, texts, digital trails of fear. And they showed how Mia and others were trained to protect Diddy at all costs, even if that meant cleaning up blood from hotel suites. Mia testified about the so-called freak-off nights. The term had been introduced by other witnesses, but Mia gave it dimension. She said she'd drop off supplies, candles, towels, certain items requested in advance, and then she'd come back in the morning. What she found, she said, was carnage. Wet floors, smashed bottles, blood on sheets, wax melted into furniture. Mia said she once asked about the blood. Diddy's response, it was Cassie's period. But it didn't feel right. None of it did. Cassie, she said, always looked distressed before those nights. Mia remembered a conversation in the car. Cassie got a text, checked it, and groaned. Puff wants to have a hotel night. According to Mia, Cassie looked nauseated, anxious. She had stomach issues. She got sick. Afterward, Diddy and Cassie would disappear for days. They called it man down. And Mia she cleaned. When she refused, she was punished. When she hesitated, she was gaslit. The prosecution introduced more photos, this time of Cassie in public appearances. Behind the glamour were signs, bruises on arms, swelling near her eyes, a split lip. One image showed her eating a hot dog at a movie premiere. Mia testified she took that photo, that the makeup was thick for a reason, and then came the audio. Mia said Cassie once recorded a fight. In it, she sounded terrified. Puff sounded enraged. The jury heard yelling, crying, and then what sounded unmistakably like a hit. A thud, a scream. Silence. Mia told the court she'd never forget that sound. By now, the jury had seen the photos, heard the tapes, read the texts. But prosecutors weren't done. They turned to the psychological web, how loyalty was demanded, how fear was enforced. Mia said she once overheard Diddy say, "I own everything. The people, the places, the memories. I own it all." It wasn't just ego, it was policy. Mia told the jury she never tried to blackmail him, never wanted to. But he made sure she couldn't even if she tried. He claimed he'd sent himself compromising photos from her phone. She said there were no such photos. But the message was clear, "I can ruin you, so don't even try." That same message had been sent to others. Mia named names. She described other women who left quietly, assistants who were suddenly replaced, executives who vanished from the org chart, each one erased. As prosecutors ended the day, they left the jury with a question not spoken aloud, but implied in every thread of evidence. If this is how he treated the people closest to him, what happened to the ones we never heard from? The courtroom had already endured days of relentless trauma, and yet day 14 brought a new weight to bear. The prosecution wasn't merely presenting a pattern anymore, it was excavating a machine. What they laid out now was the engine of Diddy's alleged empire, the logistics, the infrastructure, the silence bought and reinforced at every level. And at the center of it all, again, was Mia. Prosecutors shifted their focus to the mechanics of obedience. Not the violence, not the drugs, not even the sex, at least not directly. What mattered today was the system, because a man doesn't maintain control for decades through charisma alone. They returned to the concept of proximity. Mia had explained earlier that she had to remain within Diddy's line of sight at all times, but now the jury saw what that really meant. GPS logs, door access reports, internal revolt emails confirming her movements were monitored constantly. She was tracked. Mia described a code among the staff. Everyone understood the mood of the house depended on one thing: Puff's mood. When he was high agitated or paranoid, the staff communicated in whispers. Mia said there were group texts between assistants, producers, even security guards, conversations solely to warn each other. He's pacing, he's slamming doors. Don't go upstairs. He's looking for her. And always, be ready. She testified that there were evenings when Cassie would lock herself in the bathroom and the team would pretend she had left the property. Once they staged a fake call from a driver saying Cassie was already in the car, just to give her more time alone. The point wasn't just control, it was omnipresence. Mia said Diddy didn't want to know where people were. He wanted to decide where they could be. Another email shown in court laid this bare. In it, Diddy wrote to Mia, "Don't let her go out, not until I say. Her. Always her." Mia's role was rarely clear-cut. She testified that she was simultaneously Cassie's confidant and Diddy's enforcer. She was told to keep Cassie happy, but also to watch her. She said it felt like being both nurse and warden, and the more trusted she became, the deeper she got pulled in. There was one night Mia remembered with terrifying clarity. She was on Diddy's tour bus during a music festival in the desert Burning Man, or Coachella, she couldn't recall exactly. The bus was outfitted like a nightclub: blackout curtains, laser lights, loud music. On a table were 3 plates. Each held lines of powder, Molly, cocaine, ketamine. Diddy told everyone it was a game. According to Mia, participation was mandatory. She said she tried to fake it, pretend to snort and blow it out later, but Diddy watched her, confronted her, cut a new line just for her. He told her she was messing up the vibe, so she did it. And that night she said something inside her snapped. Not from the drug, but from what it represented, that her consent no longer mattered, not even to herself. The prosecutors returned to this moment again and again, not for shock value, but because it illustrated the core of their argument. This wasn't a man who occasionally lost control. This was a man who institutionalized it. Mia admitted she began using more regularly, that she was trying to cope, that she believed doing so made her part of the inner circle. She called it the breakfast club, Diddy's phrase, for the ones who stayed up with him, who partied until sunrise, who earned his trust by sharing in his excesses. And it was never just partying. Prosecutors brought out photos from that tour. Mia, Cassie, and several others in costume. Everyone smiling, everyone dancing. The jury saw what the world saw, the curated fantasy, but Mia told them what came before those moments. What came after, the pressure, the fear, the cleaning. She testified that Diddy kept what she referred to as the med bag, a Louis Vuitton duffel filled with prescription pills, party drugs, and other paraphernalia. Witnesses before her had mentioned it. Mia confirmed it always traveled with him. She once caught a glimpse of pills stamped with smiley faces and X's over the eyes. That detail landed hard. Then came the revolt incident. Mia described it as one of the worst moments of her life. She had sent a text to a stylist, Derek Rowe, venting. She wrote that Diddy was being a jerk. She testified that Diddy saw the message. He grabbed her phone, locked himself in the bathroom. Mia said she tried to stop him, reached for the door. That's when he slammed it over and over onto her arm. She held back tears, describing the pain, the bruises. She said she thought he had broken it. Later at the studio, he said something she never forgot. "I wouldn't want someone going through my phone if I had what you had." She didn't know what that meant, but it scared her. Prosecutors used this to reinforce a theme. Fear wasn't a side effect of Diddy's leadership. It was the foundation of it. Fear of punishment, fear of isolation, fear of being discarded. Mia told the court she once confronted him, quietly, hesitantly. She said she asked why he always acted like she was against him. He responded, "Because everyone turns on me eventually." And that was it. The moment of clarity. The engine exposed. Not a man trying to maintain control, but one expecting betrayal and punishing people in advance for it. The gallery was silent, the jury still, and across the room, Diddy kept his eyes forward, fingers laced together. The prosecution was building toward something, but Mia's truth had already detonated. The final day of Mia's testimony arrived like a closing argument disguised as memory. There were no more outbursts, no more new names, just the remnants of everything already said, stacked high, undeniable, devastating. The courtroom no longer buzzed with shock, now it held its breath. Mia returned to the stand wearing the same expression she wore on the first day, tired, focused, and free from hesitation. The tears were fewer, the pauses shorter. She was not there to break, she was there to finish. Prosecutors guided her back to the very beginning, the first few months, the subtle shifts, the moments she convinced herself she was lucky. She told the jury how she once believed she was working with a genius, someone who could elevate her career, just by proximity. And then how that belief became a trap. She talked about how loyalty became currency, how being loyal to Diddy meant lying for him, hiding evidence, smearing other women, and covering for things she barely understood. How she told herself over and over, this is just what it takes. But it wasn't. She described the moment she knew she couldn't stay. It wasn't the physical assault, it wasn't the drugs, it wasn't even the sex. It was when she realized she had stopped recognizing herself. I didn't know who I was anymore, she said. I only knew who I needed to be for him. Prosecutors played one final recording, a voicemail Diddy had left her years earlier. It was short. Just a few sentences, but the tone was enough. Slurred, aggressive, possessive. He told her she better not mess this up, that he made her, that he could unmake her. No one in the courtroom moved. Mia said she kept that message for years, not as a threat, but as proof. I thought if I ever disappeared, someone would know. She told the jury that she didn't come forward for revenge or fame or money. She said she came forward because she knew others couldn't, because she believed deep down that the truth would matter. And then she looked up. For the first time in all her testimony, Mia looked at the jury. Her voice steady, her words clear. I was never the only one, just the one who made it out. Then she stepped down. The courtroom sat in silence. The judge called for recess. The jury filed out slowly, eyes glazed with the kind of focus that can't be faked. And Diddy. He sat still, shoulders tight, jaw locked, scribbling something on a yellow notepad. In the hallway outside, Mia disappeared behind a wall of security and friends. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't need to. Her story was now part of the record. Later that afternoon, the prosecution called their final expert, a trauma psychologist who testified to the consistency and credibility of Mia's account. Using clinical language, the expert explained how prolonged exposure to coercive environments erodes autonomy, how victims often adapt to survive, and how delayed disclosure is not only common, it is expected. The prosecution then rested their case. It had taken 2 weeks, 6 witnesses, hundreds of exhibits, dozens of hours of audio and video, and one voice, Mia's, at the center of it all. When court resumed the next morning, the defense began, but something had shifted. The tone, the posture, the eyes in the gallery. The defense could challenge details, they could poke holes, but they couldn't erase what had been heard. The world outside the courtroom was already responding. Media outlets ran headlines about Mia's testimony. Celebrities tweeted support. Activists called for accountability not just for Diddy, but for the entire culture that enabled him. And then came Sammy the Bull. In a special interview aired after the day's proceedings, former mob underboss Salvatore, Sammy the Bull Gravano, the man who brought down John Gotti, spoke out. He said if someone like Diddy had operated in the mafia, he wouldn't be on trial. He'd be dead. We had rules, Sammy said. You don't touch women. You don't do this to people who trust you. If he pulled that in our world, he wouldn't see the light of day. His words hit like a second closing statement, not from a prosecutor, but from a man who understood power, fear, and justice in ways few do. Diddy's defense team tried to spin it all as exaggeration, misinterpretation, consensual adult behavior gone sour. But every time they spoke, the shadow of Mia's testimony hung in the air. And as the trial moved into its final weeks, one question lingered, echoing in courtrooms, homes, and headlines. If this wasn't enough to break the system, what would be? Because for Mia, breaking the silence wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and the jury. They were no longer just observers. They had become witnesses to a world most never see, to a machine most never believe, to a truth too long ignored. The verdict would come, but Mia had already delivered hers, and the world was listening,